your name is so perfect, JOYrific. You're a bubbly, joyful person, and I don't think I've ever seen you not be that way. I'm sure
Oh,
that's my
there's
perception.
moments. I know my children have seen it.
Yeah. But your natural state of being is just bubbly, happy, joyful Jamie. And
Light has a way of breaking through the darkest places. A single spark can change everything. In this episode of JOYrific, we're exploring what it means to be light. How do we bring light into our own lives and into the lives of others? How do we shine even when we feel dim? Being light isn't about perfection. It's about presence. It's about choosing hope over fear, kindness over judgment, and gratitude over resentment. It's about showing up even when it's hard and lifting others when they can't find their own way. Because the truth is, your light matters. And the more you let it shine, the more it inspires, heals, and spreads. So join me as we unpack the power of light, love, and lifting each other up. Because the world doesn't just need more light, it needs your light.
Welcome to the podcast.
well, thank you. It's so exciting to be here with you. You've been one of my wife's best friends for a very long time, and so it's a delight to be with you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Now tell us the secular side of what you do, Sam.
Well, that's fair. So I'm a lawyer, but I've also been a business executive and an entrepreneur and an angel investor, and I've done a lot of things that are I just think are fun, that elevate my personal story to try and make things happen.
Let me take a second to tell you how honored we are that Sam took time out of his busy schedule to record this podcast with me today. Sam Castor is an aggressive bridge builder and strategic problem solver with over 15 years of experience in the technology sector as both an executive and an attorney. He has negotiated billions of dollars in intellectual property and infrastructure deals, shaped legislative and regulatory landscapes, and successfully resolved hundreds of millions of dollars in litigation and business conflicts. Sam's career has taken him through all three branches of federal government, working on technology policy under both President Obama and President Bush. His expertise in communication, strategy, and leadership has made him not only a sought-after advisor and executive, but also an author and speaker, including a powerful TEDx talk on the importance of compassion, candor, and collaboration. With a BA from Brigham Young University in Communications, a JD from the Catholic University of America, and an LLM in Wealth Management from Texas A&M, Sam brings a unique combination of legal, business, and leadership insight. But what makes Sam truly stand out is how he views conflict, not as a roadblock, but as an opportunity to collaborate, innovate, and create solutions. We share 3 of our top 5 strengths. He has strategy, achiever, activator, communication, and woo in his top 5.
The foundation of everything that I do is that topic of light. And so I've been a lawyer for quite some time. I worked back in DC under 2 US presidents. I worked under every branch of every branch of the federal government, USDA, FCC, doing telecom stuff. Worked for a judge in a federal courthouse here in Vegas for a while. And then I worked for a big telecommunications company called Switch here in Vegas, which was incredible, and worked with a lot of billionaires and mega millionaires, and transactions with Disney and Sony and Microsoft and eBay, and just the big stuff where it's all the big gorilla, the huge stuff, Apple, whatever. And that energy is fascinating. But I like to say I've had a professional course in how to create darkness as well as light. And so it's learning to discern between the two, because I've done deals and I've made things happen where there's that contention that comes along with that. Like you have to fight and scrap, and you have to make things, deals happen. And I've seen a lot of people use contention as a way to get things done. But I've also seen people come in and use their light and their goodness to try and build bridges and move mountains and elevate the experience for everybody around them. And after I was with Switch for about 15 years almost, I retired, and never ever thought that I would be as blessed as I've been in my life. I grew up really poor, amazing family, but we just didn't have anything. And I looked at what my wife and I had been able to build as I'd done that experience, and been a tech executive and a tech attorney. And we decided that we would take a little break. And then, I have 5 kids, and education changed my life, and education is this tremendous opportunity to change lives of those around you. And so I decided to create an initiative to try and fix the school district here in Clark County. And it's the 5th largest in the nation, and it's one of the worst. It's like a dumpster fire on top of a nuclear reactor. It's just like so broken. We have the highest child suicide rate in the nation here in Clark County School District. And so that's part of my point of, I've seen a lot of people create darkness. And I've come to this conclusion as I've gone through this experience. We tried to break up the district, and that's a whole other story. We've tried to do all these things to try and help elevate the educational experience for kids. That didn't work the way we wanted it to. So now I help kids with special needs and gifted children protect their educational rights. And I help businesses with transactions, and we act as a fractional general counsel law firm. We do all that stuff. But my fundamental premise to everything is there's 2 types of people in the world. And I've experienced this. There's people that treat people like people, and that creates light. And there's people that treat people like objects, obstacles, numbers, product, and that always creates darkness. The greatest liabilities, the greatest problems, the greatest evils in the world come whenever we buy into that one lie that someone is just an object, and they don't have feelings, and they don't have light inside them. We objectify them and treat them like something that could be manipulated or abused, violated for our purposes. So that's what we try and focus on, in everything I do. I'm always trying to make sure that the people I interact with, I'm treating them like a human who's worthy of honor and respect and understanding. And when I do that, it creates light. When I don't do that, because we all have mistakes and we bump around in the darkness sometimes, that creates contention, and that could be it always causes problems. So
Yeah.
that's why I try and channel that energy.
And because JOYrific is sort of this communication foundation podcast, especially with parenting, but talking to executives and how they function in that workplace, but then how you can then apply it in your parenting. How would you say you would want to talk to your kids, or I'm sure that you have talked to your kids about light? And I think a word that keeps coming back to me as you talk about this light and darkness is vulnerability. I don't think that, well, and also that like vulnerability is part of it, but then there's also this like the light doesn't mean that you're uneducated or that you're like naive. Like
No.
that's not it at all.
No, you're right. It's very intentional. I mean, I believe that light and truth and spirit and all of those things they're all interconnected. They're all related, right? To your point. And so let me share an example. So in my former life as a litigating, I had this experience where I had been litigating with this other attorney. She was very intelligent. And I had spent I spent 2.5 years regularly interacting with this person, because it was a very large, multi-million-dollar lawsuit, hundreds of millions of dollars. And we did lots of depositions together. That's where you sit in a room and you ask each other questions. And I didn't like her very much, and she didn't like me very much, because we were opposite ends of the table, right? Like we were fighting. And I remember during one deposition where it was in LA, and I was expecting it to be just awful, because she just was so contentious and so grumpy. I mean, one time I even got in a car accident on the way to a depot, because we did about 60 of these over the course of 2 years. And I got in a car accident, and I showed up about 20 minutes late, and I was a little stressed because I want to be on time. And she's like, "You're late," when I showed up. And she knew I had been in an accident. And I was like, "I got in a car accident." And I was so wounded that she didn't even ask me if I was okay. Even though we're adversaries, right?
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there in LA, and she's the deposition is going as I expected, a little grumpy, but we have this expert witness who's this grandfatherly gentleman, very kind, and he just radiated this kind of light I'm talking about. He just radiated love and kindness and compassion and understanding, even though we had sides. He treated everybody as just, he honored them as a human. And during the break, we'd been going for about 3 hours, and we took a break. And during a break, she could feel this love from him. And I had been praying in my heart that whole day that I would figure out how to master dealing with conflict without it becoming contention, that I would be able to deal with that stress and still have light with me instead of it turning into, anger or frustration. And she leaned over to him during the break, and she got vulnerable, to your point. And she looked at him and she said, "Can I ask your advice on something?" Now, this is really weird because she's used to like grilling this guy, right?
Yeah.
And she's like, "I just had a baby, and I never thought being an attorney would be this hard and take this much of my time. And I don't know if I should hire an au pair or a nanny, or if I should just quit my job and just go be a mom." And I was like, "How are you being this vulnerable with me?"
She said that to you?
She said that to my expert witness.
Okay.
It wasn't even her witness. It was my witness. He was on my side, but
Yeah.
he radiated such love and kindness. And and maybe it was me too praying. I had been praying
Yeah.
that this would be a different experience than the prior 40 experiences. And she just got really vulnerable. And in that moment, Jamie, I looked at her and I saw this 6-year-old little girl.
Oh.
And I just thought to myself, that's who she is. She's not this person that I've grown to hate. She's this little kid who's just trying to figure out how to be a mom and have a job and all the, modern demands. And he just had compassion on her, and I did too. And now whenever I get angry at someone, I'm not very good at it most of the time, but I try to look at people and think of them as very compassionately, not condescendingly, not judgmentally, just with all the love I can muster. I try and look at someone and go, "Who did you look like when you were 6? How did you show up?" Because that helps me. It may not help everybody, but I can see a 6-year-old through different eyes.
Yeah.
And I can look at them and go, "Oh, you're just like me. Where I'm just a 6-year-old on the inside too." And the rest of my interactions with her were much more cordial after that because of that compassionate love. So I try and tell my kids, to your question about parenting, whenever they're dealing with stress or problems, I know it's sinking in because they repeat it. I just heard my son repeat it this morning. My daughter was stressed out about getting her picture taken, and her hair wasn't curled the way she wanted it to be, and all this kind of stuff. And my 9-year-old said to her, "Grace, how you show up in your photo doesn't define you. That's not who you are." I was like, "Whoa, this is working." And it's like, instead, there's this mental understanding, this heart-mind alignment where you go, "Oh, my experiences don't define me. It's really, I have these relationships and these connection points with other people that matter more. And that truth, that light, that relationship is what defines me." And so even if I'm in a place of darkness or stress or, disturbance, or I'm in a storm, I can still be at peace myself because I have that light
Yeah.
inside me.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. A big part of the JOYrific magnet chart, and I know you guys have one.
Oh, we love it. My kids use it all the time. Yeah.
So a huge part, and I created this 15 years ago, right? Like,
Yeah.
and you don't even know the lessons that you're going to learn from it. Like it was definite, it's truth and it's beautiful. But one of the huge lessons that now my kids do is only you can move your magnet. And
Yeah.
I think of that when you tell this story about at work, how this contention, but allowing you to keep your magnet on kind and not have that affect your magnet and move it, right? It's a life. Those are life lessons. And my teenagers have come home from high school and have said, like, "Here's the scenario and here's the story, and she was blaming him or he was blaming her, and whatever the breakup and this big situation." And they say, if only they knew, like, you are the only one that can move your magnet.
Yeah, you're in control.
You're in control. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I never thought that was going to be like a byproduct of what the JOYrific chart was going to create. Like,
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I
and
love
it's
it.
so simple and so beautiful and so
Yeah.
hard. So
I
hard.
agree.
It's also hard.
It is hard. It is hard to stay in that place of, "Oh, I actually have choice." In fact, even today, I was dealing with a point of conflict with some of the education system stuff here in Vegas. It's terrible. They just cut a whole class in the middle of the semester, and they claimed it was for funding. And immediately everybody's like, "Oh, they're doing this to try and manipulate the legislature and everybody feels concerned we're getting treated like an object, right? You're getting manipulated.
Yeah.
And as I was sitting there thinking about it, getting frustrated, all of a sudden I had this thought: your power doesn't come from your anger.
Hmm.
And that to me is just a reinforced narrative or point about the fact that I believe we generate light. We are beings of light. We have this energy inside of us, and we can talk about the science and Einstein and electromagnetic frequencies and all that kind of fun stuff, because I've studied that as a telecommunications attorney. I've looked at frequencies and things. But at the end of the day, the truth is, like, the energy I have inside me, the light that I have, the love, the truth, I have to choose to give it away. And my real power isn't in being angry, which I always associate with like more of a darker red energy. And I think most people do. You look at Star Wars and Darth Vader has a red lightsaber. And Luke has a green or a blue, right? There's the darker energy, the darker light, and then there's the lighter light, and there's a whole spectrum, right? And my power doesn't come, and our power doesn't come from anger. It comes from love, and it comes from compassion and vulnerability and that connection.
And so Garth and I, we have talked endless about this because we also agree. And I would say socially, in the society that we live in, anger is a more acceptable social response than vulnerability.
Yeah.
And that is it's hard because if you want to be vulnerable, like it's just easier. Like it's easier for me to yell at somebody, or it's easier for a boss to yell at an employee. Like that's a normal reaction. And I had the CEO yelling at me one time, and it wasn't actually my fault. The thing that he was yelling about, like it was somebody else's fault, but I was the fall guy for the situation, and I took it. And somebody said to me, like, he's yelling at you because like he knows that you can take it, and he actually likes you because that's why he's yelling at you. If he didn't like you, then he wouldn't care or take the time.
I've heard that too. And
Yeah, but just because I can take it, that doesn't mean that I'm willing to take it. Yeah. But that's hard. It's a hard thing to find, for me to then stop and say, okay, he's yelling, but like if he would have just come at it from a vulnerable place instead of a place of this anger, how different would that workplace be? And that's why I love Clifton Strengths, and the Clifton Strengths that help people to understand people's strengths and how we can coordinate and collaborate with that.
Yeah. You
guys do Clifton Strengths at your law firm, right?
We do. Yeah. I'm all about treating every attorney uniquely, individually, as a human, right? And identifying that. And so every attorney, we cover the cost of them just taking the exam, and so we can collaborate and connect. And it's interesting because I've heard that too, that idea that, oh, you can take it, or they only share it with you because they care about you. And I think that there's some truth to that. I mean, there's even scriptures that talk about how God only chastens those that he loves. And so maybe that's where some of that idea comes from. The risk is that I don't think God ever chastens us like we're an object. Like he always honors our agency and our humanity. He honors us as his children. The risk is we as humans fumble at that, and we are trying to manipulate someone or control someone with that anger. And that's the problem, is if it's designed to control. And so one of the things I always try and tell my kids too is, hey, the way you really create light, or the way you really create relationships, is instead of forcing or taking from others, you receive and you share.
Yeah.
And it's a different energy, and it's a different modality. It's a different way of looking at the world. Like, I'm not trying to manipulate people. I'm not trying to force my way. I trust that God has a plan. There's a purpose in this. If I have light inside me, things are going to flow. And so I receive, and then I share. And that's so powerful, because all of a sudden you start to realize you don't have to be the source of power. You don't have to be the source of all the solutions. You're a part of it, but really just as a conduit. You can receive that energy to make change. You can receive that purpose, or that vision, or that drive to make something happen. But at the end of the day, God's the one that is working the magic. And to me, that's the ultimate reality of light. Like, all of a sudden we start to radiate that type of purpose in life.
Yeah. Well, and I think so. A lot of the people that I coach and that I talk to about this type of stuff, so toddlers are one thing, right? Like you want to manipulate a toddler to not put their hand on the stove. Like that, I would say is a good manipulation, right? Whatever
At
you're
least
going to
teach
do,
them, right?
right? Like teaching them, like
Yeah, yeah,
or
yeah.
to not run into the street. Like I am
Sure.
going to physically grab you and manipulate you in a healthy, appropriate way. But then you also then the pendulum swings, right? And so then you have these adult kids and maybe teenagers that are getting into adult ages where I can no longer like hold you from running into the street. Like you're driving your own vehicle. You like I have to let go of this concept of I have control over you, which is really hard because I have really good ideas and I'm typically right. And so
I'm
how
sure your husband says you're always right. You know?
I, he is the best thing that's ever happened to me. We all know that. So how do I help them and how do I let that go? And I think that's exactly what you're talking about with that light of having it and you share it, but they get to make their own choices. And that's hard. That's hard to watch, it's hard to see, it's hard to be a part of. And that's kind of what this podcast is right now is I am letting go of some of those choices and seeing that and seeing those examples from other people that have done it really well. And also seeing the struggle from those who have these adult children that have left their church or don't want to be a part of the family, don't want anything to do with it. And the parents coming from a good place trying to share their light and they just don't want a part of it.
Yeah,
And
it's so hard. That's so painful, isn't it?
yeah,
I have a couple of cousins who won't talk to me because of differences of opinion and politics and things, and it could be really jarring. And I think a lot of that comes from fear. And so I've studied. What's fascinating to me is I've studied for a while this idea, and I've had this question inside of me for a long time. That if God is like the epitome of like he's everlasting light and he has all this energy and power and he's the source of all creation, all this just the opposite of entropy, right? Like he's just naturally like a spring of life and all this amazing stuff. And then on the other hand, you have the devil or Satan or darkness or whatever you want to call it. That's supposed to be the opposite. That's where you get entropy and decay and inertia and damnation and all this stuff. I'm like, well, then how does the bad side have any power to do anything? And I've really pondered on that for a while. And then finally, I realized that the only way that type of darkness, the devil, Satan, whatever, has any power is if we surrender our light. Because we still have that choice. And we say, oh, okay, I'm going to go ahead and buy into this lie, or I'm going to buy into this victimhood, and victimhood really is just, I'm going to treat myself like an object, or I'm going to, blame somebody else for my actions. I'm going to feel like I was claim I was manipulated. I'm surrendering my agency. And so to be able to make sure we protect against that, I just feel like it's so critical that we acknowledge that we have that light inside of us. We have that choice. And we're here. I believe we're here on the earth to learn how to be in harmony with that truth and that light, to be our best selves and learn how to deal with those lies and stay in a place of truth.
so how do you do that? Like, what are the like practical steps you could do or advise kids to do, or teenagers or toddlers or whatever it is, a wife or anybody that's struggling? What are some practical steps that you have found?
That's a great question. There are one of the things that I like to share with people. I didn't plan on talking about this, but this is sitting on my desk. There are things we say to ourselves all day long, right? Little messages we have about what we're dealing with, how we're feeling, what our personal narrative, like a little story that's playing like a
Internal dialogue, right?
Yeah, our internal dialogue. Yeah, our internal narrative. And I think we can gain so much power. I've experienced this. We can gain peace and light and have more purity in our purpose if we identify the lies we're telling ourselves. And they're usually from an experience that we've had that's been painful or caused fear. And so we're defending ourselves from it. And instead of staying there, if we can identify the lie and then have compassion, cognitive behavioral therapy is a great way to deal with this. Have compassion, name the lie, and then identify the truth that counteracts the lie, because truth is light. All of a sudden we can liberate ourselves from the darkness. And so I've actually created, these are my core truths And like, I'll email these
Yeah,
to
send it to us.
yeah, but like one of them is remember who you are, know your purpose. Like one of the things I have is you were born to shine. And I think that's true for all of us. We're born to radiate light. We're born to be brilliant examples of in my belief of God, like we're his children. And we're not here to be shrinking or afraid. We're actually meant to radiate and be bold.
You've made it this far. And if you're on your morning commute, like Ainsley, who takes about 27 minutes to get to work, this might be the perfect stopping point. If you got to go, have a great day. I totally understand. For those staying with us a little longer, I want to take a moment to let you know that every guest on this podcast is here for a reason. I always have a purpose when I invite someone to join me on the JOYrific podcast. And while we usually keep our conversation focused, we also love to linger longer. So if you're enjoying the discussion, stick around. At the end of this episode, you'll find an extended track where we continue the conversation, unfiltered, unhurried, and full of extra insights.
And so one of the things I always teach the kids I get to interact with, because I interact with a lot of kids in my profession and in schools and stuff, I teach them if they stay focused on the idea that that they have light inside themselves, and that as they love other people and treat other people like humans instead of objects, they generate more light. And that light can grow brighter and brighter until the perfect day. And I like to talk about how eventually we become so full of light, we become like a human lightsaber. Like, and we give out lightsabers to kids when
Oh my
we're
gosh, I love
it's
it.
like, right? It's like you can be so full of light. When you walk into a room, you change the room.
Mm.
When you walk, you define the experience instead of being defined by it. And that's the epitome of being an actor instead of an object, is you have the ability to radiate that light and then you change the experience. And I believe that's what God does. He changes everything. He shows up and everything
Yeah.
is better.
So this keeps coming back to me. So when I created JOYrific, it was be helpful, be happy. Like those are kind of my rules. That's my mantra. Like it's so easy for me to be happy. Obviously, it's how I was raised. It's just kind of who I am.
Sure.
And once JOYrific came out, I had people that really struggled with that and the be happy aspect of it. There are times where you feel not happy,
Sure.
and I changed the wording from be helpful, be happy on the JOYrific chart to be helpful, be kind. And I think that that's kind of talking about what it is that you're saying here, like that kindness aspect of you can be that light. You can still be sad. You can still be depressed, like you can still have anxiety. There's a lot of things but there's still light that you can have.
That is so true. And in fact, I think I've told you some of this story, but about 4 months ago, I found out I had a brain tumor. And that was a very difficult experience. You know, I had to have surgery. I was in the hospital for a while. I remember saying goodnight to my kids because I went to Utah. I left Vegas, went to Utah to have the surgery. I remember saying goodnight on FaceTime and just seeing my little 8-year-old or 7-year-old weeping. I went, Dad, when you come home, are you gonna be okay? I mean, that's one of the hardest experiences you can go through, is that a brain surgery. I never thought I'd have a brain tumor. But what was amazing is even though I was physically depressed and I was dealing with a very significant health challenge, I was going blind, I felt so full of purpose and so full of love and so full of gratitude and light that I just embraced it. I just charged into that experience and kept reminding myself, I can be grateful for this. I can learn from this. I can grow from this. And I believe I wanted that experience. It's like celestial weightlifting. It's like, let's go through the discomfort. And one of the things I tell my kids all the time is discomfort is the currency of heaven. It's like how you learn, how you stretch, how you grow. And I think you're spot on. You can be depressed. You can have difficulty. But if you have purpose, and your purpose is to create more light, to connect with God, to help other people, you know, follow those commandments of love others and love God, then all of a sudden you can take the focus off yourself and you can be filled with light, even when you're having those difficulties.
So I want you to speak a little bit, and we can decide if we cut this, if it doesn't even apply at all. But you've interacted with very wealthy people. And sometimes I feel like there's this lie that we tell us, like, I'll be happy or I can be light as soon as I like have enough to
Yeah.
as soon as I have enough. Like,
Mm.
what would you say to that?
Uh, that's a natural trap, right? And I think it's actually that goes to victimhood, or us surrendering our agency, or us treating ourselves like an object, objectifying ourselves, because we're basically placing our happiness or our potential or our purpose, we're placing it in someone else's hands or some other circumstance. But the reality is, we are here to learn how to define our experiences, not be defined by them. And I have worked with extremely wealthy people, and I've been very blessed myself. And I I look at wealth and I recognize that if that is where we think we'll find our happiness, then we're surrendering that agency to stuff, to dust. But everything is dust, right? At the end of the day, my hair, look at my bald head, like everything eventually is dust, except for relationships. And so the best way to harness that light and to find real happiness and peace is not in wealth, it's not in comfort, it's in trusting in those relationships and trusting in that connection. And that creates the most amount of joy and peace and comfort you can possibly have, because all of a sudden you're hanging your hat, you're hanging your worth, you're finding your purpose, defining yourself by something that will not change. Everything else changes. But my relationship with my family, my relationship with God, my relationship with myself, who I believe I am, that won't go away, as you know, like money, like a bank account, or like inflationary stock markets and all that can take stuff away.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I hope that answers your question. But
Yeah, no, I think it does. And I think that I come back to like, how do we practically help our kids learn that? Like, what is the skill that we as parents can do to teach our kids that lesson? Like, what do you do? I don't know.
Well, I think you have a lot of really good tips. I'll give you 3 things I do. Number one, whenever my kids are stressed or whiny or upset, I try and always get them to just pause and take a breath. And I say, hey, just breathe. And it's not just the box breathing, because as soon as I can get them to calm down and breathe for a second, then I say, who gives you breath? Because every breath, I know that now, having almost lost my sight and almost died from a brain tumor, I know every single breath is a gift. Every single breath is another moment on this earth. And so, and if I can stay in gratitude mode and recognize that God's giving me that breath, then all of a sudden I'm just filled with joy. Like that, to me, gratitude is the key to real joy. Gratitude is the key to real happiness. So that's one thing that we always focus on. I always ask my little girl, I'm like, who gives you breath? And she'll be upset and she'll be like, Jesus does. Because that the breath of life, right?
Yeah.
And then another thing that we'll try and do is we will try and name the things that we're grateful for other than breath. We'll try and identify 3 good things that have happened throughout the day. Because there's one of my favorite verses of scripture says, he or she who receives all things with thankfulness, the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? Everything. If you receive it with thankfulness, then you'll be made glorious, and the things of this earth will be added unto you even 100-fold, yea more. Like not just 100 times the earth, but even more. Yeah. And so there's something about receptiveness, and that type of gratitude mindset allows us to receive and see that anything that looks like it's darkness is actually an opportunity for us to create light.
Yeah.
So when we're confronted with that stress or that pain or that fear, it's a chance for us to practice to learn how to radiate light against that stress, against that darkness, the chance to be and to burn more brightly.
Yeah.
And then the third thing that I think is absolutely critical is there's so much about this idea of what we tell ourselves. And I think there's something, the idea, I know there's something, the idea of every time we're stressed or we deal with something difficult, we pause and examine that moment. And I try and remind my kids to do this. Like, what are you telling yourself right now? How are you showing up? How are you, like, what's your reaction? What's true about that? And what's not true about that? And if we can slow down and pause and look at our experiences and give ourselves the space to think and analyze, I think all of a sudden you can look at the scenario and you can see there's some darkness and there's some light in every experience. And we get to choose whether we focus on the darkness or whether we focus on the light. And if we can focus on the light and stay in gratitude and do all these things we talked about, all of a sudden we've gained a superpower to be able to we can define our experiences instead of be defined by them.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I think right when you were saying that, something that that I'd like to discuss with you, like as a lawyer, is when our kids find themselves in a place that is sucking the light out of
Mm,
them,
mm,
how can we help them to get out of that situation? And whether it's a relationship, whether it's a job, whether like whatever it is, if they have found themselves in a place that is sucking light out of them. And oftentimes you can't tell, you don't know that you're being
oh,
dimmed, your light is
yeah,
being dimmed.
yeah.
Like what, I don't know, what advice do you have in that area?
Oh, well, I have some thoughts, but I'm sure that there's a lot of other better answers than this. But
Okay, well, and while you're thinking, I'll let you think. The other
mhm,
thing that I thought when you were explaining that
okay.
is I think Satan would love us to live in that chaos,
Oh yeah.
to continue to not be able to identify the light from the dark and to spin out of control. Like I think that he loves that. He loves that.
Yeah, the chaos is where that darkness thrives, right? Like it
Yeah.
doesn't want the order, it doesn't want the harmony. Um, I agree with you 100%. And uh, my belief is that every experience is an invitation to come closer to God. Every experience is an invitation to learn how to be more in tune with ourselves. And we're walking paradoxes, right? Like well, not only do we have men and women and the different dynamic we have to deal with there, and we have two different types of politic, right, in America. We also have hearts and minds, we have spirits and bodies, we have night and day. Like we're surrounded by paradoxes. And I think our purpose as we create this light, it's really us learning how to reconcile those dichotomies or those paradoxes, those things that are in stress with each other, those oppositions. Because it's that whole breadth, that whole spectrum of opposition that allows us to actually be actors. It's what allows us to not be objects and to make choices. And the Hebrews actually have a really cool word for this, where they talk about the emotions of joy and sorrow. The word is nechom, and it means fullness of joy and fullness of sorrow at the same time.
Mm.
And so just because we feel stress or we feel sorrow doesn't mean we can't also feel joy, and we can't also feel sweetness and purpose. And actually feeling both of them at the same time allows us to understand and connect with everyone around us, because we all experience those emotions. And so when we're in those places of stress or sorrow, I think we need to honor that as a gift, that we can feel that, we can understand that. And then I try and do this, and I try and my wife is very good at it. We try and surrender that and give it back. So we receive it and then we give it back to God, and we say, how do you want us to feel about this? What are we supposed to learn from this? I remember I broke my back 15 years ago, and the back surgery I waited, pushed it off. It didn't work after I finally did it a year later after I broke my back, and just chronic pain. I remember walking around my neighborhood with a baseball bat, hitting my back, trying to get it to loosen up and try and get some stretch. I was just in pain all the time. And finally I walked, it was late at night. I couldn't sleep. I walked over to this tree in my neighborhood. I just leaned up against the tree and I was like, God, please teach me whatever I'm supposed to learn as quickly as possible so I don't have to be in pain anymore. And I think that's what he was waiting for, because as soon as I was open to accept the pain as a gift, understand that he feels that for me too, because he's our father, and he feels pain when we feel pain, because what good parent doesn't?
Right.
When their children are in pain or sorrow, they feel it too. But he loves us so much, he lets us go through that discomfort, and he's just waiting for when we're willing to open up our hearts and have soft hearts and say, okay, teach me. I'm down in the mud. I'm down in the most fertile place for growth. I'm down in that dark valley. Teach me how to create light down here in this darkness. And as soon as we turn and as soon as we look, he will pour light upon us like the sun coming up over a mountain. And I have felt it, and I have known that that has happened. Every time I've asked for help, I've felt the light just buoy up inside me. And it doesn't mean the problem goes away immediately, but I just learned how to kindle that celestial fire. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention this. The Hebrew language also has this amazing word, Jamie. It's Shekinah. And the evangelical movement really loves this word because it's like super cool. It's almost like Shekinah. And it's kind of like that. But Shekinah is literally celestial burning or everlasting fire. And this idea that we are meant to be as bright as the sun. Every single time there's some spiritual experience in the scriptures, right? God shows up, angels show up. It's always boom, there's someone full of light, so bright it's brighter than the noonday sun, so bright it's brighter than lightning. And the first thing people always say is, fear not. It's like when they're saying, like, don't be afraid of the light. And so we're supposed to learn how to have that Shekinah inside us, that burning. And then when we're in that position, physically, chemically, physics wise, it's amazing because things don't change fire. Fire changes everything else around it.
Mm.
And so that's what we're looking for.
Yeah, I love that. But
Thank
like
you.
water does have an effect on fire.
That's true. But that's just extinguishing the reaction, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
Give us one last sentence.
I think when you can realize that when you treat people, it creates light, all of a sudden you'll look at people around you. Every single person you walk by is this wonderful, amazing, fourth dimensional, not just time and space, but like love. They have all this, they're this amazing creation that is also meant to create light and connection and has purpose. And the wonder I feel when I'm in that place, I'm not there all the time, but the wonder I feel when I look at people and I can honor the light inside them and want to harmonize with that light, it's heaven on earth. It's the most amazing thing I can experience. And so that's where I try and stay.
In God's currency, motive matters. And so as we come into these different actions and these different things, if the motive that we have behind it's going to help us with all of that. Sam, thanks for joining us today. You have a great time, and we'll do this again because I love talking with you.
I love talking to you too. Thanks, Jamie.
Thanks, Sam. Talk to you later.
I never want this to end, but that's it for today's episode of JOYrific. Before you go, I want to leave you with a little challenge. What is your B word? What are you in the middle of learning, embracing, or becoming? Maybe today you're being curious, kind, brave, or still. Whatever it is, lean into it. If you have a story to share, I'd love to hear it. Visit www.JOYrific.com to connect and collaborate as we build our JOYrific community. Thank you for making it to the end of this episode. I know that time is valuable and we appreciate you. Until next time, be curious, be helpful, be kind, be you, because you are becoming and you are beautiful.